reasonably rapidly. We're on, I think, item number 6, Natural Environment Recovery Program Internal Progress Report. Cool. Any questions before we debate? If not, there is. Yanni.
Just trying to find the page, sorry. So the question that I had was related to what's happening in regards to the flooding, and I just was the land drainage recovery program, and it says we're progressing and on track, and it says that we're looking at issues being investigated in the Dudley Creek and long-term tidal and flood protection for low-lying parts of Christchurch. My question is really, I'm struggling to see how SCIRT is aligned to what this program is trying to achieve. And so the feedback I'm getting is that SCIRT are not doing things to take into account of these issues because they've been told to put back what we had on September 4th. It seems like a huge gap. I know this doesn't have statutory effect and we can't actually require anything because it's just a program, not a plan. But can you just give me an understanding of what work staff are doing to either change SCIRT's philosophy to enable some of these natural environment issues to be addressed as part of the SCIRT works, as opposed to having to spend hundreds of millions of dollars later, which we can't afford to do?
Perhaps I'll try and answer that, Councillor Hanson. I mean, as part of the asset and network planning part of council, my understanding is that they are closely working in with SCIRT, as far as I understand, and clearly we're in a situation where SCIRT do have a program, but obviously they're trying to anticipate where council may need to go. So there is always a timing issue with some of that. I'm happy to go away and just give a bit more detail on that for you and make sure that that we can report back.
Can I suggest, Gianni, that what would be sensible is one of the examples that you raised about SCIRT was because they were replacing like with like, that they were actually replacing dish channels, which was just silly, and there's no other word for it. And we clearly don't want that to happen because the cost of maintaining them is huge and they need to go. But beyond that, I think we've asked for that to happen already. I'm wondering if it would be helpful if staff report back on how the council would work with SCIRT on flooding mitigation as works are done.
So I think it's wider than that because...
Okay, well, why don't you, just because I'm aware of time pressures, why don't you tell what you actually want to move? Right. And then I suspect there'll be council support.
What I think we should be moving towards is that we instruct our representative on the SCIRT governance group to raise concerns that the SCIRT objective of putting back like for like fails to take into account...
Express it as a positive,
yeah,
Yanni,
so
we can actually...
But I think you have to identify the problem first before you can get to the positive, which is it's failing to take into account the natural environmental issues post-earthquake, and we want to report back as to how we can get SCIRT works aligned with the natural environmental recovery program and the flood increased flood risk. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And so will you write that down so people have your words?
Sure. And can I just say, this is time critical because we've actually just had 2 more start notices around Humphreys Drive. We're building back low-lying roads that are susceptible to climate change and sea level rise.
So just be careful. I mean, roads are designed to be flood channels. Yes. So I think the intent of what Councillor Hanson is fine. I mean, ultimately, it'll be a question of funding because council has set the parameters for SCIRT in terms of like for like with modern materials.
Well, do you want me to maybe the question should be then how do we change the parameters of SCIRT and can we have a report back as to how we do that?
That would probably...
To align better with the Natural Environment Recovery Program and flood mitigation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
That would be...
And environmental sustainability, which I presume is part of this program.
That's kind of covers the entire universe.
Okay.
Actually.
Just have it reflected to this program.
To this.
And
yeah. Okay. Are you guys?
Is that okay?
Do you know what you're doing? Yanni, would you like to stand up and actually, or just sit down, just move exactly what you want?
That the council ask for an urgent report back on how to change the parameters of skirt to, instead of replacing like for like, skirt take into account the Natural Environment Recovery Program.
Or just how to change the parameters with, actually it's spelled wrong, but never mind, of skirt to better align with the Natural Environment Recovery Program.
And flood, and the increased flood risk.
Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Cool. Second it. Thanks. And did you want to speak, Tim?
Just to clarify, 2.2 of the item, the last point on 2.2, the NERP process report, March 2014, is an internal report for the Committee of the Whole. See attachment 1. Page 28, item 8. Now we've gone on about no betterment, etc., and you've got to go through a process, yet item 8, act on opportunities to reduce sewage overflow on their effects. During rebuild, improve wastewater infrastructure to reduce, avoid wet weather sewage overflows directly to the waterways, minimise their effects, etc., etc. So does that bypass the betterment process? Or, I mean, I'm a bit confused because I've been told we've got to go through the betterment process or our skirt will just put like for like, i.e. the gutters are a great... So that will cover... Well, I'd like to ask the question. So. No pun. Page 28, it's number 8, act on opportunity.
Yeah, so I suppose, like all these things, this program is a program across Canterbury or across the earthquake area. Clearly, it sets out some high-level objectives. They then need to be tested for their feasibility, for their affordability. So I suppose what we have is, yes, this is aspirational, and SCIRT's working within a deliberate decision of the council and the agencies that run SCIRT. I think Yanni's question, or Yanni's resolution, actually starts to say, okay, if there is a desire to reconcile the ability to take these opportunities against just simply putting back what's there, how do we go about doing that? So I think that the two aren't inconsistent. They're simply reflecting the fact that one is an aspirational document, which this is, versus I suppose the very real constraints that SCIRT's operating under in terms of actually its current mandate. So, and I think the resolution asks staff to report back on how we might explore, changing that relationship. So I don't see the two as being inconsistent.
Okay, Pauline, then Ali.
I've got a question unrelated to that, is that all right? I've got two questions. On page 25, we talk about the flood management and staff are working with the Christchurch West Melton Zone Committee. That's at the bottom on 3.1, the second to last bullet point. Especially about low impact urban design approaches. So does it mean that any new subdivision plan would be run past the zone committee to oversee or check up on their stormwater management plan in that?
We use we work with the zone committee as a sounding board for engagement with the community as a whole. And the example that I've stated here is that we are working on the Avon Stormwater Management Plan, and the Zone Committee has helped facilitate several workshops with the community to get their input on objectives and goals for the SMP and how stormwater is managed. And the Zone Committee really is a partnership between ECAN and the Council, and is there to be able to help facilitate engagement with the community and give feedback. So that's purely their role. It's not a role where we would, other than maybe providing information on development, etc.,
They don't have statutory powers, but
Yes.
I'm more looking at, you know, when we're building houses, and particularly we're in intensification, are we looking at really good, responsible stormwater management design so that we're not impacting any further on our existing infrastructure?
I'll leave that to Mike.
So yes, that's exactly what we do. So fundamentally, and under the regional plan, we're not allowed, particularly in greenfields areas, to discharge more water than we previously discharged off greenfield areas. So all those issues around how we manage stormwater management are clearly there. So the fundamental issue is quantity management, and then particularly around this is the quality management environment, how we actually create a better quality stormwater environment. That's where the zone committees are fundamentally part of the work that the council does.
Committees would always be informed of any new developments?
No, not necessarily. No, it's not their role to be informed of every new development. It's their, it is their role to, as Clive has outlined, to basically provide feedback into how we might manage that in an overarching sense.
Okay.
But individual ones are consenting issues that the council is responsible for.
And my second question, if I may, Vicky, is just on the next. Pardon? Okay, on the next page, if we could explain the eco sanctuary being investigated by DOC, where is that and what is it? Just quickly.
The eco sanctuary is proposed for the Travis wetland area and part of potentially the red zone neighbouring it, and it's a piece of work that is being led as I say, by Department of Conservation to investigate the feasibility of that.
Very quickly, because I've heard it several times already, this comment about Skirt's obligation to return things to like for like into the position they were in September 2010. Unless I misunderstood recently, it is quite clear that that is not happening. In fact, at a presentation we had at Shirley Papanui, there was a mention, or it was communicated to us by Duncan Gibb that won't be the case in some places, and that there will be patchwork on roads, and roads, etc., will not be returned to the level of service that they were prior to September 2010. When I raised why was that, it seems to be a funding issue. So I'm very wary of using phrases like Skirt is returning things to like for like, because they're not.
Yes, I did, and question, and Pauline may well have covered this actually, I think, but it's just that the whole integration, going back to what I thought was a very good, you take these with a grain of salt, but I must say very good letter to the paper with regard to greenfields, what we've done in the past, future planning, catchment, etc., the whole Flockton question. So my question is, how joined up is everything, the LERP? With the NERP, we're looking at an exemplar project today, and just that whole joined up approach when it comes to drainage, catchment, etc. Or has Pauline just covered that?
Our stormwater management plans involve extensive technical investigation work, from ecological right through to modelling of storm event and flooding return periods. It's very detailed, and it looks at the stormwater detention facilities, treatment facilities that we need to improve water quality and volumes of water that's being released during a storm. And clearly we are looking at a whole range of treatment options. Low impact design is one of those, which is stated in here, such as swales, rain gardens, pervious surfaces. And we do have to take a holistic approach, because water, whatever it touches, is impacted by wherever it flows. So we do look at the wider picture and take a holistic approach and try and interface with all parts of council's business when we're looking at stormwater management.
Can I just, are there actual, joined up meetings between the different parties, or?
Yes, we regularly meet as a stormwater management team. We have technical experts from right across Council's business as part of the team, and we also work with ECAN technical staff as well, and we involve other interested parties in our technical meetings. Yes.
Two very quick ones and two different things. Just with regards to this that we have up here, SCIRT are a government agency, therefore any adjustments or negotiations with the parameters would have to be directly with the Minister, wouldn't they? Because Duncan Gibbon, aren't they?
SCIRT's an alliance, which we're 1/3 of that alliance.
So we can negotiate directly with them with regards to the parameters?
Well, yes, we can. I mean, but ultimately, the government, the other agencies are governed by their own funding parameters, and if we're moving beyond those, then clearly the cost comes back to council.
Okay. Very quickly, second one. With regards to number 12, the support community gardens, which would be the lead agency, I would suspect, wouldn't it be the Community Garden Association, if that's the driver? I was just kind of interested in wondering which organisation would be the lead agency on that. I was just wondering the questions behind that.
Good question. They would be party to it. Yeah. I know with the official NERP monthly meetings that at the moment it is ECAN that are driving that engagement with non-government organisations, so I'd expect them to be party to that.
Okay, thank you.
Very brief. Can we get a report back on the asbestos issue? I'm really concerned to see that there's still a need for guidelines when so much demolition has already been occurred. And I'd also like to know if you're doing any work around hydraulic fluid being put back in.
I can't answer that question. I would have to get further detail.
So I don't know. Again, I don't know that we're doing anything. I mean, those things would be covered presumably by MB, but we can certainly come back and update you on where MB is at on both those issues.
Interagency group. So we are involved in that. They had a meeting on the 27th of February. What we need, I think, is a report back on what. Given that it's only now being identified there needs to be guidelines, I think we need a report back on the issue of asbestos and hydraulic fluid being left on soils and what we as a council might like to do to address this issue. Yep. Second question is there a... oh, yeah. Cool. And the second one is there any measure of sustainability in terms of the earthquake recovery? Are there any sustainability indicators that that have been put into place to monitor, you know, when SCIRT do the presentation around how much road they've fixed, if you actually put a different lens into how much road have they made, you know, in a new environmentally sustainable way, or how much recycling have we got, or is there any sustainability measures? And if not, is that something that could be looked at?
In response to your question on sustainability, I don't think there is anything specific in the NERP, but there is a monitoring program to be finalised for how we're tracking against the various projects in NERP.
Yep, very briefly, just wanted to make 3 points. One is that I think we're looking at one of the most unsustainable recoveries of all time. When you look at actually what's happening, Councillor Jones is absolutely right. We're now being told it's actually not like for like, it's like for less, or less for like, and it's really concerning. Actually, there's a short-term cost to get a long-term gain. What we're seeing is a short-term financial savings that are going to have a long-term cost to us as a city and as a community, and I'm really concerned about this. The roads that are being fixed should be taking into account sea level rise and climate change. Clearly they're not. If you look at Fitzgerald Ave and what happens there when it floods, it actually is a lifeline, and lifeline routes and the flood events were cut off, and that is clearly not acceptable in a modern day society, and clearly the skirt repairs that are happening should be able to take into account these things. So I strongly support the additional resolution. And the final point I'll make is that there's actually a number of really good things in this in terms of the projects, but where it's not happening is we're not seeing the way in which we're making progress to getting that sustainable recovery. And so I just think it's incredibly important that we do send a signal as a council that we really do want some firm measures to know what's being done, because we keep getting told it's a question of cost. And in my view, yes, there is a short-term cost to having a sustainable, environmentally friendly recovery, but there is a huge long-term benefit that will more than outweigh that short-term cost. So I think what's happening is we've got it the other way around, and we're making, as I said, there's been cost cutting where we're getting low quality infrastructure repairs that are going to leave a long-term legacy of a particularly nasty one going forward, and we need to start addressing that now because the work is happening as we speak.
Roads and their purpose in flooding, actually, so that there isn't a misunderstanding about that. Mike.
So I think what we need to understand and be very careful of that roads are actually designed as part of the flood management system. So our roadway systems do form what are known as secondary flow paths. So when you get beyond either I think a 1 in 10 year event, some of the roads are designed to actually carry water and keep water away from property. So they actually provide a dual function. They do provide a traffic function, but they also provide a stormwater management function or a flood management function as well. Having said that, we are moving to more, as you'll see on our bigger roads, more softer ways of demonstrating that by using swales and planted green areas rather than hard channels that we have historically.
Those opposed? Carried. Item number 7, the approval and